All right, we're being asked to simplify and reduce this. What's really being asked is for us to subtract these two expressions from each other. To do this, we need to find a least common denominator, and this is really a simpler least common denominator than some of the examples that we have, but it's going to be more difficult because these denominators don't share any common factors. Always our first step is to factor as much as possible each denominator, but each of these two denominators cannot be factored anymore. So we just treat them as separate factors. In this case, our least common denominator is going to be x plus 3 times x minus 3. So then we're going to do the work of making these denominators the same, and this is done just by adding the factors that we're missing. So in this first expression we have 14 over x plus 3. The factor that we're missing is the x minus 3, so we're going to multiply this on top and bottom by x minus 3. And for the second fraction, what we're missing is the x plus 3. We have the x minus 3, and so we need to add the x plus 3 to the numerator and denominator. In the numerators, I'm actually going to perform the multiplication. So 14 times x minus 3 is 14x minus 42. And in the denominator, I'm just going to keep this as x minus 3 times x plus 3. I could FOIL those, but there's no reason to when we deal with these. We're going to want this in the factored form for simplifying at the end. And up here in the other numerator, we have 9x plus 27 over this same denominator of x minus 3 times x plus 3. Now the big work of finding the common denominators is done. Now what we have left to do is just to interact our numerators. So we have 14x minus 42 minus this other numerator. And one tricky part, folks, is we need to make sure we subtract the whole second numerator. So you need to place parentheses around that. And that's all over our shared denominator here now of negative, or x minus 3 and x plus 3. And what we're going to do now is simply combine like terms, distribute the negative in the numerator, so that move was just distributing the negative. Now combine like terms up there. And this is what we get when we combine the like terms up in the numerator. And the last step would be to see if we can factor that numerator and cancel any common factors between it and the denominator. But the numerator cannot be factored, and so we're going to leave it in this form. Just a quick conversation and a review of what we did here once again. Again, it looks like a lot of steps. It's just a lot of kind of math work for what we're trying to do. We factor our denominators and then look for the unique factors. In this case, there are no shared factors. We're left with two things that have nothing in common. When that's the case, our least common denominator doesn't require a lot of analytical thought. It's just our least common denominator is the multiplication of those two. And then we go through the process here of adding the factors that we're missing. I just want to speak to an example that you've all seen like this, but just with numbers, just to talk about the concept when they don't share any factors. Let's look at two different examples here real fast. If you're asked to add 1/4, add or subtract, doesn't matter really, and let's say 5/6. There takes some work when trying to find the least common denominator here. We wouldn't just multiply 4 and 6 together to get 24 as our least common denominator. We would identify our LCD to be 12, which is a number that both 4 and 6 go into or multiply into. But it's neither one of those, and it's not the multiplication of those two. Another case, and this case is more like what we're dealing with in this problem, is you have 1/5 minus, let's say, 3/7. In this case, 5 and 7 don't have any common factors, so the LCD just ends up being those two things being multiplied together, or 35. And so, as in the case of the problem we just dealt with, the next move would be to simply multiply this second fraction by the denominator of the first one, and vice versa over here in the beginning, where we're just adding the factor of the other denominator. Again, that's just directly related to what we just did right here. There were no shared common factors, and so we simply just multiplied each fraction by the other denominator, both in the top and the bottom.